So, it was a Saturday afternoon like any other. I was in the garage, working on my bike, sweating through my shirt and feeling that satisfaction that only comes from getting something done with my own hands. My dad was out running errands, leaving me alone in my own world of metal and grease. I did not mind it, peaceful, straightforward, no nonsense. But just as I was tightening a bolt, the garage door opened. I looked up, expecting to see my dad, but it was Linda, my dad's new wife. She was 60, but you would never guess it, blonde, elegant, and always in control. I figured she just came to check in, maybe ask if I wanted a drink or something. But her eyes, the way she looked at me, they seemed different. There was something intense there, something that did not match the usual small talk. "Hey," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you spend a lot of time in here, you know?" I shrugged, wiping my hands on a rag. "Just trying to finish this up." She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the concrete, and leaned against the workbench, closer than I expected. "You work hard," she said, eyeing me up and down, her gaze lingering a little too long. "Do you ever take a break?" It was a strange question. Linda never came into the garage, let alone struck up a conversation about my work habits. Therefore, her presence threw me off balance. I cleared my throat, tried to keep it casual. "I guess I could use a break," I said, though I had no intention of leaving my project unfinished. But she did not move away. Instead, she took a step closer, and I could feel the tension grow in the room. She reached out, her hand landing lightly on my shoulder. Her grip was steady, firm, and I felt my whole body tense up. She had never touched me like this before, not even close. She smiled, that warm, confident smile, and I felt trapped, unsure what to do, what to say. "You know," she whispered, her voice lowering, "you do not have to be so serious all the time." The words hung in the air, and I could feel the heat rise in my face. I glanced back at my bike, half assembled, as if it could somehow offer an escape. "Linda, I think my dad." Her finger came up, pressing against my lips, stopping me mid-sentence. She leaned in closer, her perfume thick in the air, and my mind raced, trying to make sense of this situation. It felt wrong, all of it. But I could not deny there was something magnetic about the way she held herself, the way she commanded the room, the way her hand rested on my shoulder, unyielding. "I know what you're thinking," she said, her voice almost daring. "But maybe some things don't need to be overthought. Maybe they just happen." Therefore, I was left standing there, trapped between her words and the space of the garage, every fiber in my body screaming at me to pull away, to shake off her touch. But I could not move, frozen by her gaze, her confidence, the way she seemed so sure of herself. And just as quickly as she had started, she pulled back, smiling at me with that same, unreadable expression. I stood there, rooted in place, as Linda backed away, leaving the air heavy with tension. I forced a laugh, trying to break the silence, to shake off the strangeness of the moment. "Guess I should get back to work," I muttered, reaching for a wrench and pretending to focus on the bike. But I could feel her eyes on me, watching, like she knew exactly what she was doing. Linda did not leave. Instead, she leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, eyes sharp, as if she was assessing me. It felt like a challenge, her just standing there, refusing to break the silence. But I could not just ignore her presence, every move, every breath felt magnified. I gripped the wrench tighter, my knuckles whitening, as if that grip could anchor me in reality. "So," she said, her voice casual, too casual, "do you have a girlfriend?" I felt a jolt run through me. Why was she asking me that? My mouth went dry, and I kept my eyes fixed on the bike. No, not right now," I mumbled, hoping she would drop it, but I knew better. Linda never dropped anything. She laughed softly, almost mocking. "A good-looking guy like you? Hard to believe." I swallowed, glancing up at her, feeling my face heat up under her gaze. I am busy, you know? With work, school, helping my dad around the house. Not a lot of time." Linda tilted her head, smirking. "You should make time, or else life will just pass you by." She paused, her gaze intense. "You never know what or who you are missing out on." Her words hung heavy in the air, the implication clear. I forced myself to look away, to focus on something, anything else. But it was no use, she had cornered me, and we both knew it. Linda, I started, my voice shaky, trying to find a way out of this. My dad. But she cut me off with a laugh, a low, knowing chuckle that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Your dad, she said, rolling her eyes. He is out doing who knows what, while I am here, alone, trying to pass the time. It does not have to mean anything. I blinked, stunned by her bluntness. This was not a game, she was serious, and I was caught in the middle of it. Therefore, I knew I had to say something, anything, to stop this from spiraling further. Linda, this is. Look, I do not think this is a good idea, I stammered, stepping back, trying to put some distance between us. But she moved with me, closing the gap effortlessly, her hand reaching out to touch my arm, grounding me in place. Relax, she whispered, her voice smooth as silk. No one has to know. This can just be our little secret. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest, my mind racing with thoughts of my dad, of what would happen if he ever found out about this. But Linda's grip tightened, her fingers digging into my arm with an intensity that left no room for argument. She was not just suggesting anymore, she was demanding. I do not know, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Linda leaned in, her eyes fierce, almost daring me to resist. Come on, she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. Live a little. You are young. Do not tell me you have never thought about it. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think straight. She had me cornered, and there was no way out, no way to escape the tension, the pressure she was putting on me. Her grip on my arm loosened, but the weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I was backed up against the workbench, every nerve on edge, every instinct telling me this was wrong. Yet, there was something about her, something magnetic, that kept me from stepping away, from saying no. Linda smiled, reading my hesitation, savoring it. See? You are curious, she said, her tone daring, almost triumphant. There is no harm in letting things happen. But I knew there was harm. My dad might have been distant sometimes, focused on work and everything else, but he trusted me. He trusted both of us. That thought echoed in my mind, but Linda's presence drowned it out. She leaned in closer, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that was hard to shake. Linda, my dad, I started, my voice cracking slightly. She sighed, rolling her eyes, her expression hardening. Your dad is a grown man, and he has his own life. He does not need to know every little thing. Her fingers brushed down my arm, leaving a trail of heat that made my pulse jump. And neither does anyone else. You keep secrets all the time, do you not? I opened my mouth to protest, but the words caught in my throat. She was relentless, pushing, testing every limit. And for a second, I considered giving in, letting her take control. But something inside me resisted, that small spark of self-preservation that would not die down. Therefore, I took a deep breath, stepping back, forcing myself to break eye contact. I think you should go, I said, the words coming out sharper than I expected. Linda's smile faded, replaced by a flash of irritation, like she had not anticipated me pushing back. She straightened up, folding her arms across her chest, her gaze narrowing. Really, she said, her tone colder now, challenging. After all of this, you are just going to pretend like nothing happened? I hesitated, my stomach twisting. This was exactly what I was afraid of, that things would get messy, that I would lose control. But I could not let her manipulate me, could not let her keep pushing me towards something I knew was wrong. Look, Linda, I do not know what you were expecting, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, firm. But I cannot do this. I cannot betray my dad like that. Her expression darkened, her jaw tightening, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out. But instead, she just laughed, a bitter, mocking sound. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. Play the good son, the dutiful little boy. See where that gets you. I clenched my fists, biting back a retort, my chest tightening with frustration. This was turning into a nightmare, and I just wanted it to end, to be over, to escape her gaze and the twisted game she was playing. Linda took a step back, her eyes scanning me with a look of disappointment, almost disgust. I thought you had a bit of courage in you, she sneered, her voice low and taunting. but I guess I was wrong. I could feel my face flush, a mix of anger and shame boiling up inside me. But I held my ground, refusing to let her words get under my skin. I would not be baited, would not let her pull me into another round of her manipulations. Therefore, I stayed silent, watching as she finally turned on her heel, heading toward the door, her movements sharp and controlled. As Linda walked away, I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was laced with something darker: resentment, confusion, a sense of betrayal that stuck with me like a bad taste in my mouth. She was my dad's wife, someone I was supposed to trust, yet she had just crossed a line I never thought possible. But as I stood there, trying to process what had just happened, the door swung back open, and she paused in the doorway, casting a look over her shoulder. Her eyes were cold, a sharp contrast to the playful warmth she had shown moments ago. "You know," she said, her voice like ice, "people do not like being rejected. Especially not people who have done nothing but welcome you into their home." I tensed, realizing where this was going. She was not just leaving it at that, she was going to turn this around, make it something ugly. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady, though my pulse was pounding in my ears. She smirked, a dangerous glint in her eye. "I am saying, your dad trusts me. And if he ever got the impression that you were being difficult, well, I do not know how he would react." She shrugged, feigning innocence. "He might believe me. After all, I am his wife. I am family." The weight of her threats settled over me like a storm cloud, dark and suffocating. She was not just letting me walk away, she was holding this over my head, twisting the knife. I knew my dad, he was a good man, but he was loyal to a fault, and if Linda spun this the wrong way, I did not want to think about the fallout. "Linda, you do not need to do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, desperation slipping through. But she just laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "I do not need to do anything," she replied, her voice sharp, unforgiving. "But I think you need to think about what kind of son you want to be, and what kind of life you want to have here." Therefore, I was left standing there, her words ringing in my ears, every muscle tense, feeling trapped in a game I never agreed to play. She gave me one last look, a smug, satisfied expression, and disappeared back into the house, leaving me alone in the silent, empty garage. For a long time, I stood there, my fists clenched, anger boiling in my veins. I wanted to shout, to scream, to break something. But I knew none of that would change the situation. She had me cornered, and as much as I hated to admit it, she was right. If she decided to turn my dad against me, I did not know how I could prove her wrong without looking like the bad guy. My head spun with frustration, resentment simmering as I realized the twisted hold she had on me. She had set the rules, drawn the line, and now I was stuck, forced to play along or risk tearing my family apart. I wanted to tell my dad, to lay it all out, but the thought of him doubting me, of siding with her, it made me hesitate, made me second-guess myself. Days passed, the tension building every time I saw her, every glance a reminder of her silent threat. I felt like I was living on edge, one wrong move away from having my life torn apart by the woman who was supposed to be part of my family. And I knew this was just the beginning.